Spring 14 Wave Release. I'm Chad Collette, the Director of Marketing at Ledgeview Partners, and I want to thank you for joining us today to learn more about how you can take advantage of the exciting, innovative new features and updates that the Microsoft Dynamics product team has put together for the 2014 Spring Wave Release. I'd like to start by answering probably the most asked question during any webinar: is this webinar being recorded? The answer is yes. Later today, you'll get an email from me with a link to access this webinar on demand and watch it whenever you'd like. We encourage you to share this with others in your company and your network. We've allotted 60 minutes for today's session, and our presenter, Jason Lattimer, has roughly 45 minutes of material to cover, and then we'll field as many questions as we have time for. To achieve the best audio quality, we have everyone in listen-only mode today, but if you have a question at any time during the webinar, you can enter those via the question pane in your GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll address those at the end as we have time. If at any time we don't get to certain questions, we'll make sure to reach out to you and get every question answered. Before I introduce Jason, I'd like to take a minute to introduce our company, Ledgeview Partners. I know on the webinar today we have several of our customers attending who are very familiar with us, and I want to thank you for your business. We also have a lot of people who may not know Ledgeview, so let me give you a quick dime tour of who we are. First, the very best way to see who and what Ledgeview is all about is to watch our 90-second video located on the homepage at ledgeviewpartners.com. At Ledgeview Partners, we focus on CRM. In fact, CRM is all that we do. When Ledgeview started, a conscious decision was made to not be all things to all companies, but be very, very good at one thing: customer relationship management. Ledgeview is a Microsoft Dynamics CRM Gold Certified Partner and a Salesforce.com Cloud Alliance Partner. We are a member of the President's Club, Inner Circle, and Partner Advisory Council for Microsoft Dynamics. But more important than the accolades from Microsoft are the great relationships we've built with our loyal customers over the years. That's what really drives Ledgeview Partners and is reflected in our 98% customer retention rate, which is our favorite statistic. And now I'm excited to introduce our favorite CRM MVP, Jason Lattimer, who is with us today to talk about the Spring 14 release. Jason is a CRM development consultant at Ledgeview and a very passionate product evangelist. Jason knows CRM inside and out and has been working with Dynamics CRM since version 1.2. That's a long time. Jason's been a speaker for Convergence, which you hope, by the way, you're planning to attend in Atlanta in 2015, CRM UG, and of course, Ledgeview's own Fall User Conference in Chicago. If you're passionate about CRM, I would suggest checking out his blogs and soaking up some CRM MVP knowledge, which now I will turn it over to Jason to do just that for you over the next 45 minutes. Take it away, Jason.
Hello, everybody. Just a quick overview of what we're going to be covering today. First off, we're just going to take a look at the roadmap of where Microsoft said we were going to be and what's coming up in the future. Then the bulk of the presentation will be talking about what's new and what's changed in the spring release. This includes some of the new features, but not only that, we'll talk about what's new in the mobile application, what's new for online customers as far as sandboxing and what that means, some new things for developers, and then we'll also spend a little time at the end looking ahead to what's coming, or projected to come anyway, in the fall release, also known as the Vega release. So, without further ado, we'll jump right in. Microsoft announced at Convergence earlier this year they're planning on having 8 releases for the Dynamics product line, excluding ERP. So right now in the spring quarter, we're looking at, obviously we just got the Leo release, also known as the spring release, also known as Service Pack 1. So if I refer to those, any one of those different things, they're all the same thing. They're all the spring release. We're also seeing Microsoft Dynamics Marketing, that used to be called Marketing Pilot. That's hitting right now. And also the social listening platform is also on the verge of being released in a widespread fashion. So that's where we're at now. Coming up in the third quarter, we're looking at another release for social listening. And then once we get to fall, again, another busy time. We're going to see another update to CRM, another update to social listening, as well as marketing. And then we're also going to hopefully see the initial version of Microsoft's recent acquisition of Parature and how that's going to integrate into Dynamics CRM. So very aggressive release schedule. So far, Microsoft's done an excellent job at keeping up with that, and I don't have any anticipation that they're not going to keep up with that going forward. So moving along. So what's new in the spring release? The first thing is, contrary to what Microsoft originally talked about a while ago, was they were talking about having an initial release one time per year for online customers only, and that would in turn get rolled into a second release later on for on-premise customers. So online was supposed to be the trial, I guess, where everybody can try it out, and then on-premise customers would get it later, just to kind of avoid those situations where people don't want to get new features, you know, kind of enterprise environments, things like that. But the good thing is they kind of retracted on that in a good way, I think, is that they made this update available for online and on-premise customers both. Online customers should all probably have the update at this point. On-premise customers can download the update from the Microsoft Download Center at this time. That doesn't necessarily mean you're stuck with new features that you're not wanting to implement right away. Anything like that would be considered like a hot fix, or update to functionality that fixes a bug, that you will get automatically. But any new features like any of the new service enhancements, those are strictly an opt-in only feature, so you actually have to go in the administrator area and turn them on, turn the product updates on before you'll see some of the new service work. So we're going to jump right into CRM and kind of talk about some of the new features and just see them in action. So one thing is, if you're not familiar with the Connect site, it's connect.microsoft.com. It's a place where Microsoft lets anybody go log in and place product suggestions, and it's really a pretty cool site. So if you have like a concern with like something that how CRM functions, you don't like it, you think maybe it could be done better, I'd encourage you to log on to the Connect site and put in a suggestion maybe to change the feature. And if enough people, and there's like a voting scheme to it, so users can vote on particular features, and if a particular feature garners enough attention, Microsoft often likes to, those are the things they prioritize and have their people spend time on for the next release. So if you can go on and log a request, or again put in like business case for it, Microsoft takes those things very seriously. So one of the things that people didn't like initially with the first release of 2013 was the command bar up at the top of the screen. Initially, we were limited to only five items, and that was hard-coded. We weren't able to change that. So a lot of people felt, hey, that's too restrictive. We need to see more items. So lo and behold, in this release, kind of one thing they kind of didn't really announce too clearly, but now we have 7 items. So again, still fixed at 7, but it made a lot of people happy that was a very highly rated feedback item on Connect. And other functionality as far as the overflow still is just the same. Another thing that was a big deal for a lot of people in the initial release of 2013 was the lack of duplicate detection support when you were creating or updating a record to the user interface. A lot of that had to do with the new autosave functionality that came about, where records were saving by without user intervention. So Microsoft decided initially for the first release that they were going to turn that off. It still functioned during imports, things like that, but during the actual creation of records or updating, it wasn't in place. So they've now restored that functionality. So example, if I want to create a new record, I'm going to have a duplicate detection rule in place that just checks the name of this account. So I go ahead and want to save. I'm prompted with a window similar to what we saw in CRM 2011. So it gives us, here's the record we're trying to create. Here's the list of potential duplicates. Again, it works across the entity just like the existing functionality they did in CRM 2011. So a welcome change for a lot of people. Again, something that was, again, talked about a lot on Connect, and Microsoft heard your requests and brought it back. So moving on. Let me jump back here. Some of the other new functionality for is server-side synchronization. This takes 2 forms, in the form of SharePoint integration and also email integration. So with this release, what was new is the server-side integration to SharePoint. With previous versions, up until this point, the SharePoint integration was kind of facilitated through a web part that got installed in SharePoint. And basically what we saw was more or less a frame into SharePoint. So now we have this server-side synchronization, which more or less gives us a direct connection to SharePoint, and we're not using any kind of frames or anything like that to show content. It's more direct communication and rendered directly in CRM. So we can take a look at what that looks like. So again, instead of having a frame, we basically have a grid similar to what we see in CRM. We have some of our, we can add a new document, we can upload documents, we can still have multiple document locations associated with a particular record. A couple things we lost, if you remember in the existing version of the SharePoint integration, we did have a couple other options like send link or copy link. Those are conspicuously missing. I may be able to come in different ways, hopefully. Another big change for people, a couple of them, this is actually something that came out with the first version at CRM 2013, is you notice the SharePoint folder names. This gets created in SharePoint. It actually, in CRM 2011, you simply got, for example, just the name of the account was how it was the folder was titled in SharePoint. But that really caused problems for some people because it was sort of indiscriminate about, if you had multiple accounts with the same name, it would reuse that same folder every time. So if you had multiple accounts named Fourth Coffee, all those accounts would share one folder in SharePoint, which wasn't necessarily the right thing to do because they were probably, they could very well have been distinct accounts. So the solution for the interim now, at least, is to append the unique identifier of the record to the folder name, which, is not very pretty to look at, but at least it solves the problem for the time being of getting a unique folder for every single record in SharePoint. Another thing we lost with the server-side synchronization version of SharePoint was the ability to view folders in the list component itself. If you remember, if we have a subfolder, it's not being displayed. So basically, any documents that should be displayed in a more or less a flat sort of manner, so they're devoid of any kind of folder structure that we used to see in the actual. That was like a bug right there. If we see, so we have now we see two documents. If we go back to the SharePoint view, you can see I have a document at the root level, and I have a folder, and I have a document in there as well. But when we look at it in the CRM component, we only see the documents. So therefore, it's a little bit different. We can see in the location that it's in a subfolder, but we're actually not getting a representation of the folder itself. So that might be important for some people. Others it might not be, but it seems that Microsoft's direction is to, kind of not rely on things like direct communication for things like SharePoint and email, as opposed to, kind of having these like little pieces of middleware kind of floating around. So something to think about if you're looking at implementing SharePoint with CRM. Just keep that in mind. All right. So the next piece of server-side synchronization that was implemented was on the email side. So initially when CRM 2013 launched, we saw server-side sync to replace the email router for on-premise customers, meaning on-premise CRM and on-premise Exchange. So now what they've introduced is now online to online server-side synchronization. So if you're a CRM online customer and you also have Exchange online, you can therefore bypass having to have an extra server sitting around somewhere to take care of email. This can all be handled with direct communication between CRM and Exchange. It's pretty easy to set up. It should be a server profile created already for online. So it's just a matter of turning it on and getting rid of your email router. At which point it works kind of on a polling basis. So users' mailboxes will get polled every now and then, based on the rules set up for pulling in emails. It'll pull in emails and take appropriate action, convert them to activities. So you can see you can adjust that polling interval. You can set how many minutes. So again, if you have lots of users, you may want to set that number of minutes up a little higher. Just take that as it will. So if users aren't getting emails, it might have something to do with the polling interval. So another neat feature that came about was a small change to something in the workflow conditions. So we'll take a look at that. And basically what you couldn't do before is when you're doing like a check condition in a workflow, if you had multiple conditions you were doing, effectively they all worked as an and condition. So there wasn't any kind of or logic you could place. But they've changed that now. So it sort of reflects more what the advanced find functionality does. So you can, that same interface is brought over to the workflow. So we can take a look at an or condition. So in this case, we have pretty much the same interface as advanced find. I can select and create a condition, create a second condition, and then I can do select row, and I can group them together. And similarly, you can do the and condition, which in itself is really not changed. So I can still do select both rows and do a group and. And if you just have this by itself, if I were to save this and come back in again, if you notice when we came in, it didn't have the and condition displayed, because effectively it's already working as an and condition with multiple criteria. So again, that opens up a lot of possibilities on what kinds of different things now you can do with workflows and make them, work for you and your users. All right. So probably the biggest thing with the spring release is all the updates to the service area. Up until now, a lot of focus is placed on sales, to the sales process. So now it's the service's time to get its fair share of updates. So one of the new things is with a lot of work was put into like the queuing feature and things like case creation. So what new thing is with queues is it used to be all queues were visible by all people. So now they've introduced the concept of public queues and private queues. So effectively, I can create a queue. I can have it, linked to like a mailbox so it accepts incoming mail. But I can define it as private, and then I can distinguish which particular users have access to it. So therefore, when you're looking at a list of queues, you might not necessarily see every single queue that's out there. You can kind of use that in a way to control access. So if you have maybe queues that are for sensitive items, you don't necessarily have to give out access to every single person in your company. It's another way to limit it. And another thing along with this that they've introduced is things when your automatic case creation rules. So for this queue, I have rules set up. So I can do specific things when a case is created from a queue. In this particular instance, one of the things is I've set it so it automatically sends an email notification to the person who sent in the case, if it was something for like a queue that was mail enabled. This way they'll get a nice little acknowledgement letter, thanking them for placing a support ticket. And I can also, on that case that gets created, I can use a set of rules to set specific values on that new case. For example, I have a rule that says, okay, if a case gets created from this queue, I'm just going to set the origin field to email. Pretty straightforward. That way you can kind of default some of that stuff without having to write like JavaScript or plugins or workflows. It's a little bit easier way to kind of segregate some of that information and keep it all in the service area. And I could also do something like, again, we know maybe this is if the email is high priority. So we could do a check like, say, if the email priority is high, our result of that might be to take the case and set its priority to high. So that way we could take some other action if the customer seemed to think that particular email was very important and warranted having a high priority case. So another sort of new functionality is, along with cases, is the first thing to probably show is in the settings area, we now have a whole separate area for all the service management functionality. This is a slew of new options, one of which, another which I'd like to show is the ability to have parent-child in parent cases and child cases, and define how they, rules to kind of auto-populate and dictate how closing a case is handled. So if I click back on parent-child case settings, I can define which fields from the parent get pulled into a child case when one gets created. So that way, if it saves the end user from having to retype lots of information. You can just kind of inherit it, just like you would, like if you are mapping, some account values to a contact and you're creating it. Sort of the same situation, but in this case, this also gives us another options to dictate what happens when we're trying to close a case. In this case, we can specify that when the parent case is closed, it's going to close all the child cases. So again, if you have maybe a main case, and it has 20 child cases under it, you don't necessarily want to go through and close every child case individually. So you have an option to do that automatically. Or conversely, you can not allow the parent case to be closed unless all the child cases are closed. So if you have some kind of parent case that's taking care of a number of smaller issues, you obviously have to make sure that those are all resolved before you can close the whole thing out in general. So we can see that in action if we go to a case. So again, a new option to create child case. Thinking maps over some of that data for us and allows us, the opportunity to type in some new information to kind of specify what's separate about that child case. Another new feature in the spring release is the introduction of a routing rule. So we can define a set of some criteria and then have CRM figure out who's supposed to be responsible for that case. We could assign it to a user, a team, or we could assign it to a specific queue based on specific criteria within the case. So we go to routing rules. Have one set up. So I have a rule, basically I have, again, a condition that says if this is a high priority case, I'm going to route this to my high priority queue. Or in turn, I could route it to a specific user or team. So what that looks like when we get back to the service area and we're on a particular case, we find a high priority case. In this case, I have to manually hit a button. There's not any kind of automation in place yet to automatically apply a routing rule. Hopefully that'll come soon. But basically, I can say, okay, let's apply a routing rule. So the service rep or whoever's taking the case doesn't necessarily have to know all the the intricacies of who gets what cases. That could all be set up ahead of time by administrators. So we can route this case, and then we can go and look and see. Find our high priority queue. Well, and it's supposed to go in the queue. I think I have my rule deactivated, which is the key. Any of these things like case routing rules, things like that, all need to be activated before they can be in place. And as a side note, there's also a limitation in place right now if you're working with solutions. If you happen to export a solution with a routing rule or an SLA, as we'll talk about later, and you try to re-import it into an organization where that same rule is already in place and it's in an active status, your solution import's going to fail. Something in the import process for solutions doesn't handle that too well. So if you're using solutions with SLAs or routing rules, again, make sure those things are deactivated before you try to import, or for maybe the best practice is to put those in a separate solution, to keep them separate so they're not blocking any kind of imports of future solutions. So hopefully that'll get resolved in a future release, but it's kind of a big deal right now if you happen to be working with things like different ALM practices where you're trying to export a default solution from one environment and import it into another. This is kind of a bummer that this is happening right now. So hopefully the product team is aware of it, and hopefully they'll have a solution for that later on. All right, the next thing we're going to talk about is SLAs, or service level agreements. So we can define certain service levels that we want to meet so to give our customers the best service and make sure we're hitting specific metrics. So we have the service level agreements area. So basically, we can define different types of things like times, and this will in turn tie into things like there's a new timer control on the case that kind of gives us a rundown of, are we meeting our SLA goals? And we'll look at that shortly. So in my example, I have one set up for, I'm going to track that we need to respond to a service request within an hour, otherwise we're not going to meet our SLA that we defined. So we can see my specific details. I have response, and then I'm going to show a warning. If it's not, at 30 minutes, we're going to see the timer control. It's not going to change color, but you'll see where this comes into play. And this also ties into the concept of entitlements, where you can entitle a customer to certain number of cases or a certain number of hours. It kind of falls along the same lines as contracts previously, but it allows you to tie in SLAs to them. So in this case, we have I'm going to show an entitlement for this customer. So we can define things like a start and end time for an SLA. We can go as far as restricting like a new case from being created if it's outside of the terms of what they're entitled to. So in this case, I set up so this customer, we're giving them 10 cases in a year, some high priority cases. We've already used 6 of them, so basically we've set it up so we can, again, this is similar to the contracts functionality in previous versions. Basically, number of cases, I'm taking away when the case is created. You could also say this is related to number of hours, so when you close a case, there's that billable hours functionality you can fill out. So that would be when the case is closed and tied to my SLA. So if I go back to this customer, I'll go ahead and create a new case for them. So we're going to link it to this entitlement. Apologize. Uh-oh. Well, moving along, what we normally here we would see a timer counting down from an hour. It would be regular text color. I must have messed something up with my turning things on and off. This timer would be counting down. Once it approaches, the warning period, the timer control would turn to like a yellow color. Once it gets closer to, once it gets red, it'd start counting negatively and should show red to show we missed our SLA. Again, you can take actions too based on a particular SLA. So if we want to do something like when it gets close to a warning, we can send an email to like management saying, hey, this SLA is going to be missed, or once it's failed, we could do something like say, again, send another follow-up email to management saying, hey, we missed an SLA, maybe someone needs to follow up, things like that. Another big thing that came out with the spring release is the new unified service desk.
Hey, Jason?
Yes.
I got a couple of questions since you're in the SLAs and entitlements.
Sure.
Can a contact have an SLA, or do you have to create a case for a contact and then have that case assign an SLA?
The SLA is more of a global function that's not necessarily tied directly to like a specific like record, like a counter contact. Does that make sense?
Okay. And then it looks like another question. It looks like entitlements can be assigned to accounts. Can they also be assigned to contacts?
That is a good question. We can take a look at that. I would assume they can. Yes. So we can assign entitlements to accounts, or we can assign entitlements to contacts.
Great. Thanks
Any
a
other
lot.
questions? All right. So Unified Service Desk. So basically what this does is this is sort of an offshoot of the Customer Care Accelerator thing that came out back in CRM4. It's basically like a client application that gets installed on the user's desktop, and basically it allows you to integrate like frame CRM in one window, and also integrate things with like telephony, chat, frame in different applications. Maybe you have like some other application, a legacy application you need to frame in. Maybe you have like a website that has information you need to access. This is more or less like a hub that users can use to kind of integrate multiple different applications all in one, and also get the benefits of CRM. So some of the key features of it, you can share information between what's in the main frame into some respect like CRM, and share it to what's on the outside of the frame, like a specific chat, for example. You can have, a lot of people like call centers have like call scripting that you can, and all this is a client installed application, but the beauty of it is it's all administrated from CRM, so you can set up all these things through CRM, and then you can basically refresh them when the user logs in to Unified Service Desk for the first time for the day. It'll update and bring down new functionality. And this is also available for online and on-premise customers. So we're going to take a look at an example. So this is the Unified Service Desk installed on my machine. So this scenario we can walk through is like if a customer calls in and want to create a new service case. So right away we see we have CRM framed in this main frame. We'll have users look at a dashboard. In this case we have a search screen where you can search this particular view of customers and change the view just like in CRM. And keep in mind all this is controllable, so we can display extra tabs. We have the ability to modify this toolbar, things like that. So if, say Maria calls in to our location at our service desk. So we load up Maria's record. And there's our record in CRM, and also generates some key information that just gets displayed at the top. That's pulled from the CRM record. We also have a call script that's set up. So again, we have some text. We're saying, hey, thanks for calling, Maria. My name is Jason. How can I help you? So Maria's got a problem, so we want to create a service ticket. So go ahead and click on the Create a Case. So again, when clicking on this button outside of CRM, we've effectively executed an action inside of CRM to start a new case. So Maria's got a problem with something. She's got a broken widget. So we can save her case. So then we might think, well, while we got Maria on the phone, we should probably see if we can help find some information while we got her on the phone. So maybe we want to execute a search, a Bing search, so we can look at all the wonderful topics Bing has for broken widgets. That popped open in a new tab for us. Or also this particular one is configured to show that if you have any knowledge base articles, we could search the knowledge base. Maybe someone else had created a knowledge base article for broken widgets. We can also do things like if we want to enter some notes for the case, we can see we'll update the notes. If we click back on the notes, we can see that pop into CRM. And then when we're wrapped up, we can say, okay, we hang up with Maria, and go ahead and close the session. So that's pretty powerful stuff right there, and that's just basically what ships out of the box. As far as there's a lot of developer extensibility on what can be created in the SDK and also through the Visual Studio gallery. There's some templates you can download and install for Visual Studio that allow you to create different custom controls. For example, I have the CRM SDK templates, and under Unified Service Desk, you can see we have, like a UII adapter, application adapter. So if you want to connect to like a different application, or if you want to connect to like a website, and there's different ones for like Windows Forms programming or WPF. You can create your own custom controls to take, different actions or custom searches. So, people are just really getting started with this. There's a few examples in the SDK, but nobody's really dove in yet and gave this a run for its money to see what's really possible. But it looks like they put a lot of effort into this, making this extensible so you can integrate it with different applications. So pretty excited to get started on myself. So hopefully I can sit down for a couple of days and look at this. So should be good if you're running it, even if you're not using it in like a call center capacity, but if you have different legacy applications or different applications you need to integrate with. One approach is to, obviously, if you can read that data directly to CRM, that's one thing that you're not necessarily relying on a client installed application. But this is a different way. If you just have an existing application, maybe that's not so friendly with getting data out of it, this is another potential way that you can use for integration. Out of the box, it doesn't ship with any kind of phone providers. So if you want to connect it to like your Cisco phone, or have or reads the incoming number and does a lookup, it's got the templates for it, I believe. CPI connector, which I'm guessing is kind of the basis for connecting to different phone systems. It doesn't ship with anything. I'm told there's some legal reasons why Microsoft doesn't ship with any, but it allows you some flexibility to create your own, or maybe the individual phone providers will come up with theirs on their own eventually. All right.
Hey Jason, I had a question on how to enable the Unified Service Desk.
It's actually a download. It's on the Download Center. We could probably get the link. I don't have it handy. It's something you download from the Microsoft Download Center, and there's a solution that gets installed. It's actually deployed with this new package deployer tool I'm going to show or talk about in a little bit. But it installs several solutions into CRM that kind of make up the administrative part of it, and then any individual users would need to install the actual client on their machine.
Thanks.
All right. So couple changes for mobile. Probably the biggest one is the addition of finally the Android tablet support. Just keep in mind that's not the most latest version of Android, so if you're like 4.3 or something or earlier, you're good. But if you're on the very latest and greatest version of Android, you're still kind of out of support. Also official support for Windows 8.1 on those Surface devices and iOS 7 on iPads. So probably one of the biggest changes besides that is enabling all the service entities that used to be just read-only. So now you can actually go in as far as editing a case. I think I closed it. Well, you can go in and edit a case on the tablet now. You can also reconfigure your application to connect to a different organization without having to uninstall and reinstall. It sounds great in reality, where you don't necessarily have to, if you want to, really that's good for if you're doing testing, if you have like a dev environment or production environment, you can go in now, and we have a blog post on that, Ledgeview's blog, about how to reconfigure the tablet. You can go into the settings and you can point it at a different environment. You still have to download all the metadata, which if you have like a slow connection or an organization with lots of entities and customizations, that can still take a little bit. So it's not quite like seamless where you can just flip back and forth between them yet, but it's better than it was. So the next, I lost the slide. Oh, here we go. So online customers only should be seeing the new sandboxing functionality come into play. So really, if you're an online customer and you have more than 25 users, you qualify for a free Sandbox environment. So you should see that through the Office 365 administrative area. You should have an option to configure the new, show this on the next screen, configure a different instance if it's already configured. This would be an example of one that's not been provisioned yet. So basically what that does is it gives you a chance to deploy data and customizations to a test environment before you move them to your production daily use environment. Or if you're a smaller customer, you can also purchase a second environment to use as a Sandbox, but if you have 25 users or more, you get the benefit for free, which is pretty nice. So really, what are we talking about here? You have the options to take your production data and essentially copy all the data and all the customizations to this Sandbox environment for testing. So previously we had to rely on exporting solutions and then using like a tool like Scribe or something else to move all the data between organizations for testing. So this does it for you in an automated fashion, so you're not worrying about spending hours and hours configuring all these jobs and troubleshooting. So this takes care of all that for you. It also gives you added benefits so that you can disable background processing on these Sandbox environments. So what does that mean? So if you have things like automated emails or workflows, things like Yammer integration turned on, all that stuff will be turned off so you're not accidentally sending customer emails out of your Sandbox. You can limit logins to who can actually access the Sandbox. It'll copy all the users over, but you can limit who actually gets to log in. So you don't want everybody logging into the Sandbox thinking it's production and making changes and realizing it's only when it's too late that they've made something in the wrong environment. Which is probably not likely considering they put this handy watermark at the top now, so the toolbar on top is orange. So in big bold letters, that's the Sandbox. So hopefully nobody should get confused that they're in the test environment, but so it should be good. One day in the future we might see things like being able to take a snapshot of your Sandbox and then restore it at a later date. So if you're doing like a big data load or something, you're testing, and ultimately you'll need to rerun that probably a couple times before you finalize it. So maybe one day we'll see the functionality. We can take a snapshot before an import and then roll it back without necessarily having to re-provision the whole organization every time. So this is just a quick screenshot of what that might look like. So again, we can't take Sandbox data and overwrite production. Production right now is locked. So if you have a production instance, we don't want anybody making a mistake and accidentally taking test data and overwriting production. So Microsoft's right now locked that down. I mean, there's some, that may or may not change in the future, but right now we're just protecting everybody from, not making any, silly mistakes. So a couple of things for developers. With the new version, 6.1 of CRM, we can target a specific version when we export our solution. So if we were reusing some of to make it more friendly when we're going between different environments with different sets of features, it's a pretty nice feature. Plugin registration tool has been updated, so that way it's a little bit nice looking. It really has kind of the same functionality, but it'll in turn tie in later to hopefully the proposed tooling that's supposed to roll out for Visual Studio 2013. They also provided a new tool, the configuration migration utility, which comes with the SDK. Basically what that allows you to is an easier way of moving data between environments. So if you have some sort of configuration type data, it's not really meant for migrating all your accounts from one environment to the other, but if you have certain configuration entities, like if you have a list of countries and states, for example, you could export that data and you can specify which particular fields get exported. So you can export that from one environment to a nice little wizard. It's a little bit easier to use than the the native export to Excel and then going through the big long wizard to re-import the data. So it's a little bit more friendly than that. And it also plays nice with the package deployer utility. What that package deployer tool does is allows you to, something you build through Visual Studio, this deployment package, it allows you to specify multiple solutions and also data sets to be installed all in one fell swoop. So I could, for example, a good one that I've been working on putting together is some people use countries and states in the form of lookups instead of the actual free form fields for addresses, just to kind of give a little bit more definition to those types of things. So one of the things you could do is create a solution that's got your entities for your country entity and your state entity. Then you also have the specific data that, data files that go along with it, a country file and a state file. So what you could do is define this package so it installs the solution, so it creates your entities, and at the same time you can also deploy the data along with it. So that's kind of the big thing with solutions right now. Solutions are good for moving customizations, but they don't move data. So this tool gives you a way to move customizations and data at the same time. So if you're getting like the country state lookup type scenario or anything, it's pretty nice. In the SDK, there's also some additional tooling for creating like your own custom applications. They've introduced this XRM tooling that kind of takes away some of the high-level stuff that you normally would do, like creating a login control, for example. There's already one built for you. Or if you want to, logging is already built into the package. So that's also available in the SDK templates. So we have here's our CRM package if we were using that package deployer. We also have this WPF application for CRM. That's, if we start that project up again, it already defines a login control for us. It gives us logging. So it just kind of gives you a jump start to creating custom applications. So let's quickly talk about what's coming up in Vega. Microsoft recently announced, things that are potentially losing support when Vega comes out. This is the fall release, mind you. So they're talking about Windows Server 2008 and 2008 R2, SQL Server 2008, 2008 R2, Vista, Office 2007, and Internet Explorer 8 and 9, all planning on being out of support for CRM. So if you like to stay on the edge with CRM and you have some older infrastructure type things, you might want to look at, making plans to get those upgraded or think about it anyway. Just in general things that are also losing support in the application. Information forms, so like the old style 2011 forms, that only applies if the entity itself has like a newer form, and also like there's some revision different functionality coming around products and kits. So I don't know how many people actually use kit products. Probably not too many, but those are probably being deprecated or going away. So things that are rumored to be coming with the fall release, and mind you, none of these are set in stone. These are just things that they talked about at Convergence. So things to think about if you're planning on doing any large-scale development. Maybe that involve any of these things. You might want to maybe hold off and see what comes out before spending a lot of time. So again, they're talking about both online and on-premise. So they're talking about more time spent on server-side sync as far as email is concerned, making things like private and read-only data, so you don't necessarily sync every field from CRM to an Outlook or vice versa. They're also talking about more changes coming to how tasks and appointments and attachments are handled. Business processes that came with 2013, like being able to branch a business process. Right now, if you change a business process, it reverts back to the beginning of the next business process you just started. So they're talking about actually having like conditional branching, invoking special workflow actions out of a business process when a stage is advanced. They're also planning on introducing anyway some new hierarchy support. So they're talking about having some sort of visualizations, so you actually see like visually, here's an account, here's the sub-accounts, or here's the account, here's an actual like tree view or something like that, or tiles or something like that of what things are related. And to go along with that, they're talking about enhancing things like advanced find to introduce like a new under operator. So you could say, show me all the contacts that are under XYZ account. Calculated fields is another thing that they're talking about doing. So that would be something allegedly that you could define through the UI, but would pretty much work at the platform level. Meaning, so if you have a report or a view or something like that, and it involves that calculated field, it would show up in all those different places. So you're not having to worry about writing plugins or JavaScript or things like that to kind of perform basic calculations. And that kind of thing ties into to some extent the hierarchy, so you can do like special roll-ups for like from child to parent, things like that. They talked about enhancements to the product catalog, some things around bundling and inheritance between products. Then also, things coming up for mobile, working more with the offline capabilities for mobile, more enhancements for data security for like, enterprise customers. That's a big concern. Making sure if the device gets lost, if you can remotely wipe the device or the data or something like that, or secure it somehow. Having multiple dashboards instead of being stuck with that one sales dashboard. Again, that hierarchy support, having those visualizations transfer over to the tablet somehow. And they also tease something, maybe some sort of live notification, so you can maybe push a notification out to tablet devices like real time. We'll see if that one comes. I'm hoping personally for web resources to come to the tablet client, because that'll open up a lot of opportunities for people doing a lot of cool stuff. And that's all the content I had, Chad. Was there any more questions?
Yeah, thanks. Great job, Jason. So we got a few questions here that we'll see how many we can get to. To kind of go back early on, Paul is asking, you mentioned duplicate detection is now a cross-entity, like not just for leads, contacts, and accounts, or does it still check across those three?
It can still, it always did check across. You could always, well, you can configure it to check across multiple entities. It doesn't by default, so it's whatever the rule was. So you could have a good example is when you create a lead, you could have a rule set up to check, say, first and last name on, other leads. But you could also say check first and last name on contact. So that was something that was always kind of just, like I said, we kind of lost it for a little bit when it wasn't surfaced initially in 2013.
Okay, good. And then another question from James. Are they looking at doing CRM online to Exchange on-premise?
Yes. So that's a good question. So they're taking it into consideration. They don't have any immediate plans for you, but what I would suggest you do is go to connect.microsoft.com, and if it's a little bit cumbersome to search, I apologize for that, not my fault, but it's a little hard to search for it, but there should be some suggestions for implementing these hybrid scenarios between CRM online and Exchange on-premise and vice versa. So my suggestion would be go to Connect, find the item, vote for it. If you're really adamant about it, in the comments, put like a business case or how many licenses you might have. They look at all that stuff. They really do. Obviously there's probably some technical limitations, but it's a matter of if we can. A lot of people want it to happen. I suspect it's going to happen, but again, go cast your vote. Put some comments in there. It's only going to help get it done sooner.
Great. Question from Mark. Does the server-side sync also sync tasks and appointments? In other words, can I remove CRM for Outlook client and use server-side sync for everything the Outlook client used to handle?
Yes and no. So if you're connecting to Exchange, you can sync things like appointments and tasks, and that works. But as far as replacing the Outlook client, well, I guess it more depends. The one thing you still can't do with server-side sync is I guess the one area you could probably do, one area you fall into is tracking emails. So I mean, you certainly could create your mailbox to push every single email into CRM, but that's, I don't know that I'd recommend that per se just yet, just because that could be, depending on how you're using it. If you're having personal, people that get their personal emails, sent into CRM, that's not necessarily good. That kind of creates a lot of, unnecessary data. But if you're only really using it for, like, again, tracking like a queue, for example, where you're just tracking like a support mailbox, for example, and that's really the only time you're using it, that might be a better scenario where you could just get rid of Outlook, for like maybe that support user. So, they're talking maybe one day of having some other form of, view into email from CRM as opposed to not using Outlook, some kind of direct, like Outlook Web Access kind of framed in CRM. Hard to say if that'll come. That's just an idea that someone threw out there one time. But right now, it can remove a lot of the need for the email router. And like I said, it can remove a lot of need for Outlook, but there's still a lot of instances where Outlook is could come in handy.
Yeah. Paul's got a question here. It says, can users still use advanced find to see leads, for example, in a private queue? The example he put is sales organization where users may try and cherry pick good leads instead of the first one in the queue they are assigned. So could the manager push down leads from the private queue to their or a public queue? And could the users still use the advanced find to see those items in the private queue?
Well, I mean, part of it is if a record's assigned to a queue, it doesn't really change security on the record because it's still assigned to whoever it's assigned to. The queue is just kind of a way of grouping the items. So a private queue doesn't necessarily provide security in that route where people can or cannot see records. So I mean, it's still really, you would almost need to, I mean, that would be a scenario you almost have to, assign a lead to like a particular user or a team, and that, someone that's a member of that team can maybe expose it in a different way. If that kind of addresses the question, maybe.
Yeah. All right, a couple questions here regarding case routing. Can you apply case routing rules to 50 or 250 records in a grid, or only one at a time?
Interesting question. Let's just see. Nope, that looks like we can apply multiple. Looks like it's lit up. Yep, so we can apply it based on a grid.
Okay, great. And then can you also search other cases for related issue resolution?
I think you could probably do that with advanced find now. I think because you have to search on that case resolution activity that gets created when you resolve a case. So something like we can search activities and specify case resolution, and here we could do any kind of, description. So once we run this advanced find, it would search those specific resolution activities that were created for anything that contains, like, whatever criteria you're looking for.
Okay. All right. Onto mobile. Have you heard any kind of rumors or anything when you think the latest version of Android, KitKat, will be supported or available?
I have not heard. I know it's on the radar, but they haven't really alluded to any kind of ETA.
Okay. And then let's see. We've only got time for a couple more. We'll make sure we address some more offline, but we use Outlook, so is there a chance people will get confused with the watermark does not carry over in Outlook?
Well, you'd have to have a specific, you'd have to reconnect Outlook. I'm assuming this is directed at like the Sandbox. So you'd really have to go out of your way to connect Outlook to the Sandbox environment first off. So I'm not sure if when you open a record, if you use like the CRM form, if it still displays that watermark or not. I kind of have a suspicion it would. But again, you kind of have to go out of your way to connect Outlook to the Sandbox. So it's probably not something normal users would really have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. That would really be more something you'd have like a test machine set up where you're testing Outlook against your Sandbox, I would think.
Okay. And then right before we end off here, Jason, can you touch real quickly on the social profile that has appeared, and then just kind of some more general on social listening and the other marketing updates? And I know we talked about doing future webinars on those, but can you touch on that?
So I haven't played much with the social listening part of it. The instances haven't been provisioned for partners yet, but what I believe is on the social profiles, you can actually track a specific users like Twitter or something like that. So if, as they're getting, this is my understanding, if so if this isn't 100% correct, don't hold it against me, but what I believe is you could monitor a user's Twitter, and if there's certain, triggers, you could create a case off of, if someone said something was no good or something like that. You could optionally create like a case off of something like a, Twitter post or things like that. But the profile record itself is something like, is more the, I don't know if we can get to it. I think it's somewhat locked down. I was playing with this. Yeah, see, you can't directly create a social profile. I'm not sure where this gets created from. If it gets created from social listening and imported into CRM. You could programmatically create a social profile, but really what it's doing is, looking at like your social channel, which is something like, Twitter, or I think Facebook might be one. It was pretty limited, but I really think it's kind of a tie. I think it's just a tie-in entity to kind of tie in social listening product with CRM and which particular channel it's looking at.
All right, we are 1 minute over, and I know everybody's time is extremely valuable. We've got several questions that were not answered, and we will respond to everybody offline and get those answers to you. And I want to thank everybody for for attending today. If you want to continue to get inside tips and stay on top of the news about Microsoft Dynamics CRM, I encourage you to subscribe to the Ledgeview Partners blog. Jason is one of our main contributors, offers some great weekly tips and tricks and inside news to get even more out of your CRM. If you're on social media, which nearly everyone is these days in some way or fashion, we'd love to connect with you, so check us out on places like LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. And finally, if you have any questions, need assistance, looking to expand your CRM functionality, just give us a call at Ledgeview. The only thing better than long-term relationships is meeting someone new and starting a new one. So thank you very much for attending, and have a fantastic day, and look for the recording on this. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.